The hallway of Brookdale Riverbend, assisted living in Asheville, North Carolina, hummed softly with the buzz of fluorescent lights and the quiet shuffle of staff moving through the evening shift. Emma Hale, 32 years old and no stranger to exhaustion, leaned against the nurse's station, rubbing the tight knot forming at the base of her neck. 12-hour shifts had become her norm, but what truly drained her wasn't just the work. It was knowing her 6-year-old son, Miles, was at home with the babysitter, likely falling asleep with his stuffed triceratops and waiting for the sound of her key in the door. Emma adjusted the laminated ID clipped to her scrub pocket and scanned the digital patient board. Her name had just been assigned to room 109. Next to it, the name made her pause. Walter Jennings. Before she could make sense of the familiarity, a voice cut in behind her. "Brace yourself," murmured Gloria, one of the senior nurses, sliding a paper chart toward her. "He's a real handful." Emma glanced sideways. "Jennings? What's the story?" Gloria gave a weary shake of her head. "Retired restaurateur from D.C., or so he says. Used to be a big deal. Now he acts like we're the inconvenience in his retirement plan. He's already run off 2 CNAs today. One cried in the supply closet for 10 minutes. Emma sighed but didn't flinch. Difficult patients weren't new. She'd cared for World War II veterans who barked like drill sergeants, widows who barely spoke above a whisper, and dementia patients who lashed out in fear. She could handle one grumpy old man. Clipboard in hand, she made her way down the hall, her footsteps steady on the vinyl flooring. When she reached room 109, she knocked twice, waiting only a beat before gently pushing the door open. The room was dim, curtains drawn tightly shut. The faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air, mingling oddly with the sharper smell of old paper, and something woodsy, perhaps cedar cologne, long faded. Walter Jennings sat upright in a recliner by the window, arms crossed over a neatly pressed cardigan, his piercing gray-blue eyes already watching her like she was a telemarketer knocking on his front door. "You're not the last one," he said sharply, voice hoarse but strong. Emma smiled politely. "That's right, I'm the new one. Emma Hale, your evening nurse." Walter waved his hand dismissively. "Don't need one." Emma stepped fully into the room and gently closed the door behind her. "Well, the chart outside says otherwise, and I don't tend to argue with charts or doctors." He raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. Instead, he picked up a well-worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea, thumbing it open to a page marked with a torn business card. Emma could feel the weight of his silence, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she moved toward the monitor and began checking his IV tubing, her motions calm and deliberate. "I don't like fuss," he muttered. "Noted," she replied, "but I do like keeping people alive. So here we are." That made him glance at her again, his gaze sharp but not entirely unfriendly now. There was something calculating about the way he looked at her, like he was used to dissecting people quickly, finding their weak points. She imagined he had once run a room with nothing but a glance, but she didn't look away. A long moment passed between them, and something in Walter's expression shifted. Just a fraction. He exhaled through his nose as though accepting a temporary truce. "I don't snore," he said at last. "In case you're worried about that." Emma gave a dry chuckle. "Noted." Though nothing more was said, something unspoken hung in the quiet. A line had been crossed, a door opened just enough to let someone in. As Emma left his room to check on her next patient, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Walter Jennings than the gruff shell he projected. And what she didn't yet realize, what neither of them could possibly know, was that this reluctant first meeting was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. A second chance at family. For the first few days under Emma Hale's care, Walter Jennings lived up to every warning she had received and then some. He rejected his medication with a scowl. He complained about the food. "This soup tastes like someone microwaved dishwater." He refused physical therapy exercises, claiming, "I didn't survive 40 years in business to be ordered around by someone half my size." He even grumbled when Emma adjusted his pillows. "You fluff them like you're tucking in a Thanksgiving turkey." But Emma didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't take it personally. She had learned long ago that people rarely lashed out from a place of strength. It was pain, not power, that sharpened most tongues. So she stayed consistent, quiet, professional, kind without being soft. And each evening, as the sun dipped below the Blue Ridge Mountains outside, she returned to room 109, her steps steady, her chart in hand, and her patience intact. Walter noticed. He never said it aloud, but he began to watch her more closely. The way she moved, purposeful, never rushed, even when the halls were buzzing with activity. The way she treated the other residents, with respect, even when they forgot her name or cursed at her in frustration. There was no pretense about her, no exaggerated cheerfulness, no distant detachment. She simply showed up, over and over. It was the kind of quiet devotion Walter hadn't seen in years. One evening, as Emma replaced his IV bag, Walter spoke up, his voice rough, as if the words had to be cleared from disuse. "How long have you been doing this?" Emma blinked, a little surprised by the question. "Nursing? About 8 years now. 6 here at Brookdale." He made a low noise of acknowledgement. "That's a long time to put up with grumpy old men like me." Emma smirked. "You're not the worst, not yet anyway." To her surprise, he gave a short chuckle, a real one, not the usual sarcastic huff. Then his eyes flickered toward her wrist. A dark mark peeked out from beneath her sleeve, a bruise faint but visible in the lamplight. Walter's smile vanished. "What happened there?" Emma tugged her sleeve down quickly. "Just a bump. Happens all the time around here." He didn't look convinced. "That doesn't look like nothing." She shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "It's nothing serious. Long hours, heavy lifting, stress." Walter leaned back in his recliner, but his gaze lingered. For the first time, his voice lost its usual edge. "You work too hard." The words landed softer than she expected, not as a criticism, but as a recognition. Emma gave a small, tired laugh. "Someone has to." And then, maybe because the room was quiet, or maybe because he was truly listening, she added something she didn't usually share with patients. "I have a son, Miles. He's 6, smart, wild imagination, thinks pancakes solve all of life's problems." Walter tilted his head. 6? Emma nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the fatigue in her bones. "Yeah, he's got this stuffed triceratops named Barry. Won't sleep without him. Says it protects him from dreams that feel too big." Walter didn't speak. He just watched her, something unreadable crossing his expression. "And it's just you?" he asked finally. "Just me," she said softly. "His dad left before he was born. It's been the two of us ever since." A long silence settled between them. Emma didn't expect anything more, and she certainly didn't expect what came next. "You're a good mother." The words were simple, quiet, but they hit harder than anything else that week. Emma looked away, blinking quickly. She had heard so many things over the years. Questions about her choices, sideways glances, unasked judgments. But this was the first time someone said it plainly, and like they meant it. She stood, clearing her throat. "Well, I try." Walter gave a small nod, his gaze dropping back to his book. But as she turned to leave, she could feel his eyes on her again. That night, sometime after midnight, Emma was finishing her final charting at the nurse's station when a light on the monitor blinked red. Room 109. She rushed down the hallway, heart thudding, and found Walter trembling in his bed, his skin pale and clammy, lips faintly tinged with blue. "Walter," she said urgently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" He barely stirred. Emma moved fast. She adjusted the IV, pressed a cold compress to his head, and monitored his vitals as they climbed dangerously high. The night nurse offered to take over, but Emma refused. She stayed. Through the worst of it, through the sweat, the fever spikes, the near delirium, she didn't leave his side, because that's what you do when someone starts to matter, even if they don't realize it yet. Around 3:15 a.m., Walter finally stirred, his vision blurry, breath unsteady. The first thing he saw was Emma's face beside him, her head slightly bowed, her hand gently pressing a cloth to his forehead. Her expression was focused, but beneath it, concern. Real concern. For a moment, he was no longer in a sterile room in Asheville. He was somewhere else. Years ago. a hospital in D.C., and beside his bed, a 15-year-old girl with chestnut hair and fierce eyes, dabbing his forehead with a damp towel. His daughter, Lillian. And just like that, something cracked open. Emma wasn't just a nurse anymore, and Walter Jennings no longer felt so alone. The next afternoon brought a steady drizzle outside, the kind that blurred the windows and muffled the sounds of the world beyond. Emma arrived at Brookdale Riverbend with a slight limp in her step and a weary glance at the sky. In her left hand was her umbrella, in her right the tiny, excited hand of her son. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jennings," Emma said as she nudged open the door to room 109. "Miles's babysitter called in sick and I couldn't leave him home alone. I'll keep him with me at the station." Walter didn't reply immediately. He glanced up from his book, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the boy. Miles peeked in from behind his mother's leg, wide-eyed, dressed in a red raincoat and dinosaur rain boots, still holding a juice pouch. Walter's first instinct was to groan. Children were loud, unpredictable, sticky, but this one just stood there, curious and alert. Not a trace of fear on his face. "Hi," Miles said brightly. "You look grumpy." Emma's heart skipped. "Miles," she hissed, mortified. Walter stared at the boy, then, completely unexpectedly, let out a low huff of laughter. "Well," he muttered, "at least you're observant." Miles grinned. "Mom says I'm a detective." "I bet she does," Walter replied, folding his hands in his lap. "What's your name, kid?" "Miles. I'm 6 3/4. He held up 7 fingers, corrected himself, and lowered one. "Almost 7. I like pancakes, Star Wars, and the smell of coffee, but not the taste of it." Walter raised an eyebrow. "Smart preferences." Emma stood in stunned silence. She had never seen Walter engage with anyone like this, much less a child. Miles walked further into the room unabashed. "Do you live here? Like forever?" Walter gestured around the dimly lit space. "Feels like it. Do you have any cookies?" Emma started to object, but Walter surprised her. He reached into the small drawer of his bedside table, pulled out a wrapped packet of shortbread cookies, and handed one over like it was a business deal. Miles accepted the treat with reverence. "You're nicer than Mom said you'd be." Emma looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. "Miles," Walter's grin deepened. "Is that so?" "She said you're grouchy and allergic to kindness." "Miles," Walter chuckled, holding up a hand. "It's fine, Emma. The kid's just honest." A pause, then Miles looked up at him with that same fearless curiosity. "Can I call you Grandpa?" The room went still. Emma's face paled. "Miles!" But the boy didn't flinch. He was chewing his cookie happily, completely unaware he had dropped an emotional grenade into the middle of the room. Walter stared at him, his fingers curled slightly around the blanket on his lap. For a moment, he looked as if he might shut down again, retreat into that protective shell of sarcasm and silence. But then, "If you want," he said quietly, voice gravelly but soft. Miles beamed. "Cool." Emma was too stunned to speak. From that moment on, something shifted, not only in Walter but in the entire room. It wasn't just the furniture that looked different. It was the air itself, warmer, less sterile, softer. Walter no longer grumbled when Emma brought in his meals. He let her check his vitals without rolling his eyes. Sometimes he even asked about her day, genuinely. And when Miles came by, which he did more often now, Walter always had a cookie waiting. Miles would sit on the edge of the bed, swinging his feet and asking questions that only a child could get away with. "Did you ever ride a horse to school? Do old people have superpowers like invisibility? Why do you talk like you're from a movie?" And Walter answered, every time, patiently, even proudly. One day, Emma found them working on a crossword puzzle together. Miles was drawing dinosaurs in the margins while Walter dictated clues. Another time, she caught Walter laughing, a deep belly-level laugh that startled the nurse passing by so much she spilled her coffee. "You okay, Mr. Jennings?" she asked, peeking in. Walter waved her off. "Just got schooled in prehistoric trivia." Emma watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Peace and love. Late one evening, as she adjusted his blanket and tucked a heating pad under his knees, Walter looked at her, really looked at her. "My daughter Lillian," he said, voice lower than usual. Used to draw like that when she was Miles's age. She'd leave little doodles everywhere. Dinosaurs, too, though she insisted they should all wear hats. Emma sat beside him slowly. He had never spoken of family before. What was she like? She asked softly. Walter's eyes grew distant. She was bold, kind, fiercely protective of everyone. She had this laugh. God, that laugh. You remind me of her. Emma's breath caught in her chest. He reached for something on the nightstand. A photo, faded but clear. A teenage girl standing beside a younger woman with bright eyes. Lillian and Walter's late wife, she guessed. I lost them both in a car accident, he said simply. Emma reached out and gently touched his hand. Walter didn't pull away, because in that moment, surrounded by old pain and unexpected comfort, he realized something. He hadn't just gained a nurse or even a bright-eyed boy who called him Grandpa. He had started to gain a family. Emma Hale had always made it a point not to dig into her patients' past. She never Googled them, never snooped, never asked probing questions. In her mind, what mattered most was the present, their health, their comfort, their dignity. Whether someone had been a grocery clerk or a CEO, she treated everyone the same. But one Tuesday afternoon, that unspoken boundary cracked. Gloria, the same senior nurse who had warned her about Walter, approached her during a break, phone in hand, eyes wide. You're not gonna believe this, Gloria whispered, shoving the screen toward her. Emma hesitated. What is it? Gloria tapped the screen. A magazine article from nearly 15 years ago appeared. The headline read, Walter Jennings, the culinary king who walked away from it all. Below was a black and white photo of a much younger Walter, standing proudly in front of a sleek, upscale restaurant in downtown Washington, D.C. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his hair thicker but just as neatly parted, and his expression, it was the same intense gaze she had come to know. Emma's mouth went dry. She skimmed the first few paragraphs. Words leapt out at her like punches. Built an empire of fine dining establishments. 7 James Beard Awards. Vanished from the public eye after a tragic car accident, took his wife and only daughter. Sold off every asset, retreated from the culinary world. The article ended with a haunting sentence. Since 2011, Walter Jennings has not made a single public appearance. It's as if the man who once fed presidents and celebrities simply disappeared. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she handed the phone back. I had no idea, she murmured. Gloria lowered her voice. No one here did. Honestly, it makes sense now. The way he carries himself, the way he watches people like he's measuring something invisible. He's not just some cranky old man. Emma nodded slowly, but her stomach twisted. A storm of thoughts gathered behind her eyes. That night, as she walked home with Miles, her mind wouldn't quiet. Walter Jennings was a millionaire, a titan, a man who had built an empire, then walked away from it all. And now he sat in a quiet care facility, dressed in cardigans and flannel, letting a nurse wipe sweat from his brow during fever spikes, and listening to a 6-year-old talk about T-Rexes with jellybean eyes. It didn't compute, and it didn't sit right. In the days that followed, Emma changed. Not drastically, she still showed up, still performed every duty with care. But something in her had pulled back. She kept their conversations short. She no longer lingered by his bedside. No more soft laughter, no more sharing stories about Miles. She even stopped bringing Miles to visit, offering vague excuses about scheduling and schoolwork. Walter noticed almost immediately. He didn't say anything at first, just observed, quietly. The way he had done in boardrooms decades ago when a promising chef or investor began pulling away. By the 4th day, he'd had enough. As Emma checked his vitals, clipboard in hand and eyes averted, he spoke, his voice sharp, but calm. All right, Hale, what the hell is going on? Emma froze at the foot of his bed. Nothing, she said quickly. Too quickly. Walter scoffed. Don't insult me. You've been treating me like just another room number since Monday. What changed? She hesitated. Then slowly she turned to face him. I know who you are, she said softly. His expression didn't shift, but his eyes narrowed. stealing like a door locking. I saw the article, Emma continued. I know about the restaurants, the awards, your daughter, your wife. Silence. Walter finally leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Let me guess, he said bitterly. You think differently of me now? Emma's throat tightened. It's not that, he cut her off. Then what? You think I've been playing poor old man for sympathy? That I'm testing you? That I'm going to write you a check and vanish? I never said that. But you thought it, he murmured, eyes unreadable. You're pulling away, acting like you don't belong in the same room. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it, because it was true. She didn't want to admit it, but some part of her, the part bruised by years of struggle, of being overlooked and underestimated, had wondered if Walter's kindness had been nothing more than pity. That maybe she was just the latest charity project in a life filled with power plays. Walter saw the truth in her silence. You know, he said quietly, for someone so strong, you sure run fast when things get real. Emma snapped her head up. Excuse me? His voice remained calm. If I were just another broke, forgotten old man, would you still care? Of course I would, she said, wounded. Then why does it matter? Emma had no answer, because he was right. The man in front of her wasn't the figure in the article. He wasn't the legend in the magazine spread. He was the man who had shared cookies with her son, the man who sat awake until dawn so she could cry in peace about a broken water heater and overdue rent. The man who had told her she was a good mother and meant it, and she had doubted him. I didn't want to feel like a project, she said, voice cracking. Walter's face softened for the first time in days. This isn't charity, Emma, he said gently. It's connection. And you know damn well that doesn't come with a price tag. Tears burned her eyes. She wiped them away with the back of her sleeve. Walter leaned forward slightly. Stop running, Hale. She looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded. For the first time in days, she stayed. That night, rain tapped gently against the window pane of room 109. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that scent of earth and memory, like something had been washed clean. Walter Jennings sat in his recliner, a photograph held loosely in his weathered hands. The edges were frayed, the colors faded from years of handling. He stared at the picture, his wife, Eleanor, and his daughter, Lillian, frozen in time, mid-laugh, sunlit and alive. His thumb traced the outline of their faces. Even after all these years, the ache was sharp. It always arrived at night when the world went still. The guilt, the emptiness, the question, why them and not me? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he said, voice quieter than usual. Emma stepped inside holding 2 cups of tea. You looked like you could use something warm. Walter offered a faint smile. Thanks, kid. She sat across from him, handing him one of the mugs. The silence between them was no longer strained. It was gentle now, familiar. The kind of silence that comes when words aren't necessary to feel close. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Walter turned the photograph toward her. My family, he said softly. Emma leaned in, her expression tender. They're beautiful. She was 15 when that was taken, Walter murmured. We were on vacation in Maine. Lillian insisted we stop at every roadside diner just to test the pancakes. Emma smiled gently. She sounds like Miles. She was like you too, Walter added, voice distant. Fierce, compassionate, wouldn't let anyone fight alone, even when it nearly broke her. Emma's eyes welled. I'm sorry you lost her. Walter looked down at the photo again. I thought if I shut the world out, I wouldn't have to feel that kind of pain again. That if I just disappeared, it would be easier. He glanced up. But then you walked into my life with that clipboard and that don't mess with me attitude and turned everything upside down. Emma chuckled through her tears. You're welcome? Walter set the photo on the table beside him and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've been thinking, he said, hesitating. I don't want to spend whatever time I've got left sitting here counting regrets. I want to be part of something again. Not a business, not a legacy. He met her gaze. A family. Emma held her breath. Walter swallowed hard. Let me be that for you, Emma. Let me be the father you never had, the grandfather Miles deserves. Let me stand beside you, Not because you need help, but because I want to be there." Her heart stuttered. No one had ever offered her that before. Not like this. Not without condition or expectation. Just love. Pure and quiet and steady. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "You don't have to do this out of guilt." "I'm not," he interrupted gently. "I'm doing it out of love." Emma blinked fast. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Are you sure?" Walter chuckled. "Kid, I haven't been this sure about anything since I bought my first restaurant on nothing but a handshake and a dream." Emma let out a wet laugh, then slowly reached across the space between them and placed her hand over his. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling. "Dad." The word felt foreign in her mouth, but right. Walter's eyes closed for a second, as if he were trying to hold the moment inside him. Then in a voice that cracked with age and emotion, he whispered, "Daddy's girl." And that was all it took. Emma crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped her arms around him. Walter held her tightly, the photo still resting beside them like a bridge between the past and the present. He didn't cry, not exactly, but something in him broke open. Not with pain this time, but with peace. The next week, the paperwork was finalized. Walter Jennings became Emma's legal guardian, not because she needed one, but because it gave him a place in her life, formally and forever. Miles, unaware of all the legalities, only knew that he now had a grandpa who baked cookies and told the best stories about the olden days when phones had cords. Walter bought them a house, not a mansion, but a sweet 3-bedroom with a wraparound porch and a little fenced yard where Miles could chase fireflies in the summer. But more than that, Walter gave Emma something no amount of money could buy: stability, belief, and a place to belong. One afternoon, as they unpacked boxes in the new house, Walter called Emma to the driveway. She stepped outside to find him standing beside a small brick building with white shutters and a sign covered in canvas. "Where are we?" she asked. Walter tugged the cover free. The sign read, "Miles and Company. Cafe, where pancakes mean family." Emma gasped. "This was my first restaurant," Walter explained, voice soft. "I sold it years ago. Bought it back last month. It's yours now." Emma covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed. Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. "Build something for yourself, Emma. For Miles, for the future. You've spent so long surviving. Now it's time to thrive." She hugged him again. No hesitation, no fear. And as they stood there in the drizzle of a spring afternoon, both of them knew. They weren't just a patchwork of broken pieces anymore. They were a family, a real one. 6 months later, Miles and Company Cafe had become a small-town gem nestled along a tree-lined street in Asheville. Locals called it the place with the heart. The scent of warm cinnamon rolls, freshly brewed coffee, and maple syrup drifted out the door every morning, drawing in customers like a comforting hug. Behind the counter stood Emma Hale, now Emma Jennings, wearing an apron that read, "Fueled by coffee and second chances." She had once known exhaustion as a daily constant. Now her days were full but fulfilling. She still worked hard, but now it was for something she built, something she could call hers. And always, always at the corner window table sat Walter Jennings, reading the paper with a steaming mug in front of him. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed Emma with quiet pride, watching her greet customers, mentor young staff, and smile with confidence she didn't used to wear. He had once believed his legacy was the restaurant empire he built in D.C. 7 cities, 22 kitchens, hundreds of employees. But now he understood. His true legacy was this cafe, this life, this second chance. Miles came in every afternoon after school, bursting through the front door like a tornado of joy. He would drop his backpack, grab a cookie from the jar labeled Grandpa's Batch, and make his way to Walter's table. "Guess what I learned today?" he'd ask, climbing into the seat beside him. Walter would pretend to be serious. "Let me guess. How to make the perfect pancake flip?" Miles giggled. "No, Grandpa, fractions." They would dive into conversation while Emma worked the espresso machine, casting glances toward them that made her chest ache in the best way. One afternoon, Miles brought in a crayon drawing, 3 figures holding hands in front of a building that looked suspiciously like the cafe. A tall man with glasses and gray hair. A woman in an apron. A little boy with a dinosaur backpack. Above it, in bold, wobbly letters, it said, "We're a real family." Walter stared at it for a long time. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the drawing, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, Miles, we really are." That evening, after closing time, Emma joined Walter out on the porch behind the cafe. The sun was dipping low, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and rust. She handed him a mug of tea, and they sat in silence for a while, listening to the cicadas hum. "Dad," Emma said softly, "do you ever miss the old days?" Walter took a slow sip, then looked out over the trees. "No," he said. "I miss the people, but not the noise, not the pressure. That life, it gave me a name. But this life, it gave me something to live for." Emma blinked back tears. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "A real home, a real family." Walter turned to her, his voice firm but warm. "You didn't just find a home, Emma. You built it. You took ashes and turned them into something beautiful. I just showed up at the right time." They sat quietly for a while longer. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "You changed my life." Emma smiled gently. "No, Dad, you changed mine." Walter Jennings passed away peacefully in his sleep the following spring. No drama, no hospital machines. Just the quiet hush of a life completed, not lost. His funeral was small but full, not with business moguls or celebrity chefs, but with the people who had come to love him in Asheville. Cafe regulars, staff, neighbors, and most of all, family. He left everything to Emma and Miles, but more than that, he left behind a legacy not of money, but of love, of belief, of second chances. Today, a plaque hangs by the cafe door, in loving memory of Walter Jennings, father, grandfather, and builder of new beginnings. And every Sunday, Miles helps bake cookies in the kitchen. Just like Walter taught him, he still calls them Grandpa's batch, because some legacies aren't measured in dollars or square footage. They're measured in hugs, in second chances, in laughter over coffee, in a child's drawing that says, "We're a real family." And in that little cafe on the corner of a quiet street, Walter Jennings' legacy lives on. One pancake, one cup of coffee, one act of love at a time. Life has a way of leading us down unexpected roads, paths we never planned, twists we never saw coming. But sometimes it's those very turns that bring us to exactly where we're meant to be. The story of Emma, a hardworking single mother, and Walter, a once powerful but lonely old man, reminds us that family isn't always the one we're born into. It's the one we build through love. Walter had once owned an empire, wealth, reputation, a picture-perfect family. But when tragedy struck, he withdrew from the world, choosing solitude over heartbreak. Emma, meanwhile, was quietly fighting her own battles, raising her son alone, working double shifts, carrying burdens no one saw. Their lives couldn't have been more different until kindness and patience drew them together. What began as routine care between nurse and patient blossomed into something far greater: connection, healing, and ultimately, chosen family. And it all started with a little boy who asked a grumpy old man if he could call him Grandpa. This story offers more than emotion. It delivers a powerful message. It's never too late to start again. Love doesn't always come packaged the way we expect. And the people who show up for you, who listen, who stay, that's family. In a world that often moves too fast, where older adults can feel forgotten and young parents stretch thin, the most valuable gift we can offer one another is presence. Not money, not status, but simple, consistent care. A seat at the table, a listening ear, a safe place to land. No matter your age, your past, or how broken life may feel, there's always room to build something new. A home, a future, a relationship built on understanding, not obligation. So if you've been waiting for a sign that it's okay to let people in again, this is it. Because real family isn't who you share your name with. It's who shows up when it matters and chooses to stay.